I ended my marriage, but when people ask why, I don't have a clean answer that sounds serious enough to justify it. Every day looked fine from the outside. We woke up in the same bed. We shared a calendar on the fridge. We texted about groceries and bills. When we spoke, it was about who was picking up dinner, what time the appointment was, whether the trash went out. If I tried to talk while they were scrolling on their phone, the phone stayed in their hand. Sometimes they nodded without looking up. Sometimes they didn't respond at all until I repeated myself. Birthdays passed with a quick, "Oh, I forgot, we'll do something later," and later never came. Anniversaries were treated like regular weekdays unless I reminded them, and even then it felt like an obligation added to a to-do list. There were no arguments, no raised voices, no slammed doors, just a steady pattern of existing next to each other without really meeting. I told myself this was normal, that long marriages don't talk all the time, that adults don't need constant emotional check-ins. I questioned whether I was expecting too much. I wondered if I was bored or restless or ungrateful. I minimized it by saying we were just tired, just busy, just in a routine. I defended them in my head. Work is stressful. Everyone checks their phone now. Forgetting dates doesn't mean they don't care. I even told myself that not fighting meant we were doing something right. We met in a very ordinary way. No dramatic story. We were introduced through friends at a small gathering. We talked about work, about where we grew up, about nothing important. It was easy. We exchanged numbers because it felt natural, not because it felt intense. Our early dates were simple: coffee, dinner, sitting on a couch watching something we'd already seen. There was no rush. That steadiness felt safe. In the beginning, what calmed me was predictability. They showed up when they said they would. They paid their share of things on time. They didn't disappear. There was a sense that we were building something practical together. It felt adult. We made plans because it made sense, not because of some big emotion. That grounded me. I didn't feel anxious about where I stood. The first shift was small enough to ignore. I remember wanting to talk about how disconnected I felt one evening. I waited until after dinner, until the TV was off. I started and they said, "Can we do this another time? I'm exhausted." I said okay. Another time didn't come. The next time I brought up something similar, they said, "You're overthinking it." I laughed it off. I didn't push. Over time, that became the pattern. When I tried to talk about how I was feeling, it was postponed or brushed aside. When I didn't bring anything up, the atmosphere stayed calm. Publicly, we looked fine. At gatherings, they were attentive enough. Hand on my back, polite conversation, jokes that made people smile. Privately, it was quiet. If I stayed neutral, things ran smoothly. If I asked for more conversation, more acknowledgement, it created tension that made me feel like the problem. I learned to edit myself. I stopped sharing small things because they went nowhere. I stopped asking questions that didn't get answered. Silence was rewarded with peace. Speaking up cost me comfort. I normalized it. When friends asked how we were, I said, "We're good, just busy." When family hinted that we seemed more like roommates, I said that's what long marriages look like. I even argued with myself. There was no betrayal, no shouting, no obvious harm. I knew it sounded small, but I kept telling myself small things don't justify big decisions. I told myself love doesn't always look exciting. I told myself stability matters more than feelings. The reasons I stayed were concrete. We had years together. Shared finances. Shared routines. Shared friends who saw us as a unit. Leaving would mean explaining something I couldn't explain clearly. It would mean admitting that nothing happened wasn't actually true, even though it looked that way. It would mean accepting that I wanted more than what was technically wrong. I stayed because walking away without a clear offense felt selfish. I stayed because I didn't want to be the person who couldn't handle normal married life. Leaving, when I finally did, was harder than staying had been. There was no moment I could point to and say this is it. There was no discovery or final argument. Just the accumulation of mornings where we didn't talk, evenings where we sat in the same room on separate screens, dates forgotten so often that reminding them felt humiliating. The risk wasn't losing them, it was being judged for leaving something that looked stable. The loss wasn't just the relationship. It was the story I had told myself and others about who we were. The turning point wasn't dramatic. It was one night when I realized I had stopped expecting anything from them. Not support, not curiosity, not comfort. I noticed that I didn't think to share good news anymore. I handled hard days alone without even considering telling them. That absence stayed with me. It didn't hurt sharply. It just sat there. Now I'm on the other side of the decision, but not free from it. I left for quiet, for space, for peace. And I have that. But I also have guilt. I replay the years and question myself because there's no villain in the story. I wonder if I gave up on something workable. I wonder if I confused comfort with love and then punished both of us for it. I'm aware of what was missing, but I'm not confident about what should have been enough. So I'm left holding this question without an answer. Is the absence of harm the same as the presence of love?